dog, too. She gives me trouble.
Your dog?
I got a female dog, you know. I tried to mate her. She wants 50 biscuits. Every day there's sun, Johnny, you know. Today's been a terrible day. Terrible day today.
Well, what happened today?
I got up this morning, did my push-ups in the nude. I didn't see the mouse trap. I know I'm getting old. Well, my last birthday cake looked like a prairie fire. You know how it is. I know I'm getting old. At my age, I want two girls at once, you know. Yeah, if I fall asleep, they got each other to talk to. What's new with you?
I assume you're through. We'll be back in a minute.
Good morning. It is Wednesday, March the 29th, and this is The True Conservative. Welcome to all the butchers, bakers, and candlestick makers out there. I'm Ron, your host, and the only true conservative in the United States today. So today, after the Serenity Prayer and the Star-Spangled Banner, we will have no free lunch, Tucker Carlson, the rape of the mind, emotional manipulation, George-Lakoff, Donald Trump, all that and more when I get back. God grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. Amen.
Ladies and gentlemen, please remain standing and remove your hats for the national anthem of the United States of America.
Thank you. And now there's no free lunch. 250 Economic Truths by David-bahnsen.
From the fact that people are very different, it follows that if we treat them equally, the result must be inequality in their actual position, and that the only way to place them in an equal position would be to treat them differently. Equality before the law and material equality are therefore not only different, but are in conflict with each other. And we can achieve either one or the other, but not both at the same time. F.A. Hayek. The damage done in the pursuit of equality surpasses the damage done by inequality exponentially. It is not our inability to achieve equal outcomes that is shameful. It is the defiance of logic and reality that such a pursuit represents. The idea that we would seek to organize a society around such a notion is dangerous, futile, and ultimately fatal.
And that was There's No Free Lunch by David-bahnsen. Back in a minute. Thank you. And now, the rape of the mind.
The barbed wire disease. Already during the First World War, peculiar mental reactions, mixtures of apathy and rage, could be discerned in prisoners of war as a defensive adjustment against the hardships of prison life, the boredom, the hunger, the lack of privacy, the continual insecurity. The Korean War added to this situation the greater cruelty of the enemy, the prolonged fear of death, malnutrition, diseases, systematic attacks on the prisoner's mind, the lack of sanitation, and the lack of all human dignity. Often, improvement could be secured through acceptance of the totalitarian ideology. The psychological pressure not only led to an involvement with the enemy, but caused mutual suspicion among the prisoners. As I have already described, the barbed wire disease begins with the initial apathy and despair of all prisoners. There is a passive surrender to fate. In fact, people can die out of such despair. It is as if all resistance were gone. See Chapter 9 on the action of fear. Being anything but aloof and apathetic was even dangerous in a camp where the enemy wanted to debate and argue with you in order to tear down your mental resistance. Consequently, a vicious cycle was built up of apathy, not thinking, letting things go, a surrender to a complete zombie-like existence of mechanical dependency on the circumstances. Every sign of anger and alertness could be brutally punished by the enemy. That is why we did not find sudden attacks of rage that were observed in the earlier prisoner of war camps during World Wars I and II. Results of psychological testing of the liberated soldiers from the Korean POW camps could indicate that this defensive apathy and retreat into secluded infantile dependency was likely to be found in nearly all of them. Yet, after being brought back into normal surroundings, alertness and activity returned rather soon, even in 2 or 3 days. Those few who remain anxious, apathetic, and zombie-like belong to the long chapter of war and battle neuroses. Strassman, what are some of the factors which can turn a man into a traitor to his own convictions, an informer, a confessor to heinous crimes, or an apparent collaborator?
And that was the rape of the mind, the barbed wire disease. Back in a minute. Thank you. Now a little bit of Stuart Varney and his guest.
The president's trying to sell voters on his economic record. I think that's going to be a tough sell, Steve. Take us through it.
Yeah, I would agree with that, Stuart. And, look, the economy isn't terrible. The numbers are almost worse than the real economy. I mean, we do have a good jobs market right now, no question about it. But, Americans just aren't buying whatever it is that Joe Biden is selling. That number, by the way, that you put up on the screen a few minutes ago, about only 20% of Americans rate the economy as good or great, those are almost flip opposite of where they were 2 or 3 or 4 years ago under Trump, when, 2/3 of Americans thought the economy was good or great.
So that's hogwash. Again, the statistics only report on themselves, on the people surveyed. So what they should have said was, of those surveyed, 20% think the economy is going well. And then 4 years ago, of those surveyed, 60% thought the economy was going well. That's the way to properly report statistics, especially if you're going to be, quote-unquote, neutral about it. Now, the question then is, and this is a technique that the left came up with. It's very subtle. It's a very subtle way, but it puts psychological pressure on people, right? So if you're a Biden supporter and he comes on and says only 20% of Americans think this is a great economy, that puts a lot of pressure on you. You feel compelled to explain and justify and whatnot. But if I come out and I say 20% of those surveyed, 2,000 people were surveyed, and 20% of them, which would be, 400 people, say, that's no big deal. You shrug that off, right? Shrug it off and you move on. That's the point of trying to claim that these polls and surveys represent people that they don't actually represent. It's power. Now, the Democrats started doing that. Now the Republicans are doing it. Why are the Republicans doing something they know or should know to be wrong? Simple. There's an idiom called that goes, if you can't beat them, join them. But the problem with that is that we can beat them, that we can beat the Democrats. It just requires a little bit of thought. Back in a minute. Thank you. And now here's a little bit of Donald Trump from the Sean Hannity show, in which he was being interviewed by Sean Hannity. I think it's just happened just 2 hours ago. And the title of this is Our Country is Dead.
You talked about age, so let's forget age. Nikki Haley, she's running for president, suggested if you're over 75, a cognitive test.
Well, I've already taken it. I do it.
You do it again.
I went to Ronnie Jackson, who was the great guy, White House doctor, now congressman, former admiral, fantastic.
Would you do it again?
Oh, I do it now. But I think I'd take it a step further. I don't think it's an age thing. I think a person running for president, you could even say running for certain offices if you want to know the truth. Now, I don't know if it's constitutional, because people would say it's not constitutional. But I would say that if you could do it, but I'd like to see it for anybody running for president. I think somebody from running for president taking a cognitive test, they do it in China, but it's done a different way. They have a caste system, and the smartest person gets to the top.
I'm glad they don't have a talk show host and the media people and people in the press.
You've proven yourself at the highest level you can.
All right, some fun questions. We're going to just change pace a little bit, just a few of them, not many.
Sure.
Should Biden replace Kamala Harris?
He's going to have a hard time doing so. A big percentage of his party will fight him on it. It's hard to believe, but they will fight him.
Okay.
I think he's going to have a very hard time doing it.
What does Donald Trump miss the most about being president?
That I could do so much. I'll give you an example. When I said I could fix this war in Ukraine in 24 hours, but you can only do it from the presidential seat. You can't do it. Let's say he sent me over as an emissary. You can't do it. You have to be in that position.
You have to be the guy.
I would fix that within 24 hours. And if I win, before I get into the office, I will have that war settled. 100% sure. And everything I said has turned out to be right. It has turned out to be right.
So you have a great life now. Besides
other than
the
being
legal
investigated
issues.
by every prosecutor in America. If I fly over a Democrat state,
right, you're prosecuted.
I jokingly say, but if I fly over, I get prosecuted by. I have to go to a grand jury the next morning.
Putting that aside, I would say Donald J. Trump has a great life in Florida, in Mar-a-Lago, plays golf, has golf courses. You play with, I know people that have played with you, some of the most famous and best golfers of all time have played with you. Why give all that up to make this next run? Why?
Because I think our country is dead. We're a failing nation, and I think we're going to fail completely. We're a nation in decline. I use the term. It's a horrible term.
Hey, Sean Hannity here. Hey, click here to...
So that was, again, Donald Trump, and saying that the country is dead. And he maybe with some good reason. There's times when I think that we're doomed. Where I agree with him on this one. Again, it's more of a personal opinion on his part than an absolute solid fact. But there are times when I think that we're doomed, because the events that are happening in our country can be solved. That we don't need the federal government to get involved. We don't need to write new laws at the federal level, state level. We just have to deal with these problems as individuals, and minimum necessary organization. And most of it is just about getting your vocabulary straight and understanding that the way we frame the argument is going to determine whether or not we win or lose. And that once we get that straightened out, so there's always that hope that enough people will start, and particularly talk show hosts, Republican talk show hosts, if they get their mind right and quit using left-wing terminology, the left-wing lexicon, Democrat lexicon, if you will, and start using proper terminology. immigrant instead of migrant, and using the term squatter and trespasser instead of homeless, for instance. And just those kinds of things. And if we did that, we couldn't lose. But too many people in the talk shows and on Capitol Hill can't seem to grasp that. Very simple idea, but they can't seem to grasp it. Back in a minute. Thank you. Now about 5 minutes of Tucker Carlson.
There's one thing your average liberal understands perfectly well. It's that there's safety in numbers. Don't go out alone. Bring 80 million people with you. It's safer that way. There is a reason, a fundamental reason that Democrats are natural joiners and organizers and petition signers, and that their highest virtue is conformity. They know that as long as they're all wearing the same uniform, they'll probably be okay. This is why you'll see one person in Brookline or Bethesda raise a Ukrainian flag in the yard, and the very next day, everybody on the street will have one too. Suddenly, it's an entire neighborhood of foreign policy experts all specializing in Eastern European border disputes. It's amazing. Just last year, these very same people were all eminent virologists, every one of them with passionate views on the details of pandemic management. This is, in other words, not a movement of rugged individuals. This is a party based on the idea of the group, the bureaucracy, the blob. It's the party of weak, fearful people who are huddled together for collective power. When the Democratic Party speaks, it is always with one voice, often in a North Korean accent. One thing the party often speaks about is gun control. No American has the right to own an effective firearm, a firearm that does what firearms are supposed to. They'll tell you this at length. Having a gun like that is just too much autonomy for you. If it continues, you may start to believe that you're a free citizen. And we can't allow that, and we won't. Joe Biden, for instance, makes this point regularly. Watch.
We're living in a country awash in weapons of war. I got it done once. I'm going to do it again. Eliminate assault weapons. It's time to ban these. It's time to ban these weapons. The right to bear arms is not an absolute right that dominates all others. You don't need an AR-15. I'm serious. Think about it. Ban assault weapons and high-capacity magazines.
You don't need an RA-15 or whatever they call it. So that's the head of the Democratic Party speaking very clearly the party's position on guns. If we don't control them, you can't have them. Every Democrat thinks this is part of the catechism. So you can imagine our surprise. The other day, we're driving through Cambridge in the old hybrid Subaru, adjusting our surgical mask to cover both nose and mouth, and listening, needless to say, to National Public Radio, the voice of menopausal liberalism. And as we're listening, we hear this. We're going to play it for you and see if you can understand our total shock.
Mass shootings targeting LGBTQ spaces and a rise in anti-trans rhetoric have inspired some queer people to take up arms. New Hampshire's public radio Todd Bookman joined a monthly gathering of a gun group that sees firearms as key to their own self-defense. And as you might imagine, this story does include the sound of gunfire.
On a recent Sunday morning, the parking lot of Pawtuckaway State Park in southeastern New Hampshire is filling up with hikers. There's also a different crew, packing up warm clothes and weapons.
Thank you all for coming to Rainbow Reload.
Your anti-trans rhetoric makes the trans community carry guns. Rainbow Reload! They're packing heat. They'll be appendix carrying in more ways than one. Watch out. Wait a second, we thought. This is NPR, National Public Radio, suddenly telling you that actually guns are good. They're valuable tools of self-defense, really against you. So there are times when guns are good, says NPR. And we thought, well, wait a second. We've been listening to NPR since, well, Click and Clack the Tappet brothers, and we remember very clearly their position on guns. For example, quote, the U.S. has more guns than any other country in the world. This is the same NPR that, in between updates on the latest trans dinosaur emojis, we've been following those very carefully, routinely runs segments calling for more gun control, and not subtle ones, like the segment entitled, Many Gun Owners Support Gun Control. So why don't they speak out? Oh, yeah. A lot of gun owners support gun control. Of course they do. And yet here's that same National Public Radio, state media, controlled by the Biden administration, encouraging people to go to the gun store immediately. But not all people. Just trans people. Guns are bad, except in the hands of trans people. Wow. Here's more.
Groups like Rainbow Reload exist around the country, often called pink pistol clubs. It's a place for experts and the gun curious to practice and improve their shooting. But this goes beyond hobby. There's a practical goal here, to prepare and protect themselves.
If the world is dangerous, then you have to be dangerous back. And that very much has pushed me into where I am now.
Ooh, the gun curious. Well, you know, when NPR describes something as the fill-in-the-blank curious, then it's a good thing. The pedophile curious, now the gun curious. The world is dangerous, you have to be dangerous back. Now, is that a quote from an FBI indictment of the Proud Boys? No, it's from an NPR segment. At this point, it's hard to tell the difference. And the lip-smacking NPR reporters just say it without any sense of self-awareness at all. There's one...
So that was 5 minutes of Tucker Carlson about the hypocrisy, and I guess it's being a Democrat and being a hypocrite are just one and the same. Being a Democrat is just synonymous with it. But the problem for the Democrats is that as they divide up and get into smaller and smaller little oppressed groups, this is the kind of thing that happens. Then you have problems, conflict between those groups. So you have conflict, for instance, between LGBTQ and feminism. Those two are at odds with each other. When women come out and say, hey, this is the Women's Month or whatnot, and a transsexual gets a man, in other words, that is changed over or tried to change over to a woman, gets an award that's supposed to be for the biggest woman athlete or whatever the case may be, an award designed for a woman, that's a problem. That's conflict between feminism and this LGBTQ. Now we have LGBTQ that is at odds with the Democrat Party's policy on guns. And not just on guns, but on peace. The Democrats have always pretended that they are the party of peace. And so I guess at least the LGBTQ part of it have given up on that thing. The last thing on this is that all of this is really about trying to create a revolution. They're desperate, absolutely desperate, the Democrats, for a revolution. They want the revolution. They want it yesterday. And they keep trying to do more and more things that are outrageous and that are going to provoke the rest of the country to rise up in violence and start the revolution that they believe will usher in socialist paradise. Back in a minute. Thank you. And now a little bit more of Don't Think of an Elephant by George-Lakoff, Ph.D.
Discrimination. Race, gender, and sexual orientation. By now, our history has made clear that racism is a freedom issue. It can impose poverty, lack of education, ill health, and worse. As we saw with Trayvon Martin, it can get you killed in some states. Our recent history has made it clear that homophobia is a freedom issue. It is as normal to be gay as it is to be left-handed. Freedom to marry for people who happen to be gay is as much a matter of love and commitment as it is for people who happen to be straight. And a denial of marriage or other rights on the basis of whether you are straight or gay is a freedom issue. That is becoming clearer all over America. The first edition of this book played a role in the adequate framing of the deepest reality of gay rights. The prior arguments were about rights of inheritance, of hospital visitation, discrimination in monetary and social matters. These were practical issues. What this book made clear was that the issue was fundamentally moral, a matter of love and commitment. All people should be free to marry whoever they love and want to be committed to for life. Progressives began using that message more and more frequently beginning a decade ago, and we have seen the right to marry progress by leaps and bounds. Framing the truth at the deepest moral level matters. What have been called women's issues are also freedom issues, and these have not been adequately framed as such. In general, body control. The right of human beings to control their own bodies is a freedom issue. Respect. The right of human beings to be treated institutionally with respect as a human being is a freedom issue. Women are human beings and have a right to control their own bodies. When that is denied, they are not free. Control over a woman's body arises in a wide variety of cases. Sex education. For women especially, sex education is required for control over one's body, since women need education about menstruation, sexually transmitted diseases that can affect future childbirth, how sex can lead to pregnancy, and how reproduction can be controlled. Control of reproduction. Reproduction occurs through women's bodies and affects those bodies in a great many ways. Women need to be in control of whether or when they reproduce. Thus, access to family planning advice, birth control methods, and abortion are issues of control for a woman over her body. Forced ultrasounds and attacks on family planning. Forcing a woman to undergo humiliation in order to exert control over her own body is a freedom issue. For example, forcing a woman, as in Texas, to have a mostly male-administered ultrasound 24 hours before an abortion, or allowing anti-abortion advocates to hound her on her way to a clinic is a freedom issue for women. Passing laws that make it impossible to keep family planning clinics open is also a violation of women's freedom. Humiliating victims of sex crimes. A free woman has control over her own body. Sex that violates that control includes rape, drugging a woman in order to have sex, exerting physical or psychological force to have sex, and so on. Police and courts who humiliate a woman who has been raped are violating her freedom. These are all freedom issues. They are rooted in circumstances that apply to women, but they are special cases of the freedom of all human beings to control their own bodies. There are also circumstances where women are not being treated like other human beings on an institutional level in significant ways. Equal pay for equal work. This is not just an equality issue. It is an issue of whether women are being treated like any other human being would or should be treated. Equality in the rating of ability for a position in an institution. In a free society, gender should make no difference in whether or not a person gets a job, a promotion, admission to an academic program, nomination for political office, and so on. These too are freedom issues. You are not free when you are not treated like other human beings with respect to how you function in an institution. Equality and freedom are not separate issues. Discrimination is a denial of freedom. Freedom is more general. It has to do with a clear path, no one standing in your way or placing obstacles, or with possessions you have a right to. It is freedom that is at the heart of democracy, and it is freedom that concerns everyone who has needs, dreams, and goals.
And that was the next segment of Don't Think of an Elephant by Dr. George-Lakoff. And what he's talking about here, all this whole thing about freedom that's been going on in this chapter 7, is really all about justice. If you substitute the word justice for the word freedom, all of this starts to make sense. Because as I've noted, he's using freedom as a metaphor. He doesn't mean literally you're not free if you're poor. Of course you are. You can go where you want, when you want. There's nothing stopping you from going out and getting a job or a second job or a third job, or going out and saving your money instead of going out and buying a six-pack and some dope. You take that money and you sock it away to save for in order to increase your net worth, for instance. There you go. Nobody's stopping you from doing that. There's no law that prevents you from doing that. So it's not a freedom issue at all. He's simply using freedom as a metaphor and as a weapon and as a way to mock and ridicule conservatives. So remember, and when you're listening to this, if you need to go back and listen to it again real quick, it's about 5 minutes or so. Listen to it and listen. And every time he says this is a freedom issue, substitute the word justice. And you'll find that the word justice fits better in all of these scenarios. And again, you're still, if you have somebody, a rank and file individual at work or somewhere else that tries to tell you that that women's not getting paid as much as men is a freedom issue, you can simply say not true. The other thing is that when anybody tells you women are not paid the same as men, it's false. It's just one of their useful myths in order to create social friction so that they can have their precious little revolution. Back in a minute. Thank you. And now the last 3 of the 30 covert emotional manipulation tactics.
28. Flattery. Any halfway clever devil would decorate the highway to hell as beautifully as possible. Chris Jamie. You, my dear reader, are strikingly intelligent, so I know you will learn to recognize the manipulation tactic of flattery. Flattery is excessive or false praise and compliments given in an effort to ingratiate you to a manipulator in order to advance his or her own agenda. Manipulators use flattery because it works. We want to feel good about ourselves, so we like others who make us feel that way. When we think someone recognizes and appreciates our good qualities, it can have a powerful effect on us. Flattery can make you feel beautiful, intelligent, appreciated, valued, lovable, sexy, or special. You may think you would notice insincere praise and compliments, but skilled manipulators can pull it off without you noticing. If flattery accompanies an obvious ulterior motive, it's easy to spot. But if a manipulator keeps his ulterior motive hidden, it can be easy to accept as genuine. After all, if this person doesn't seem to want anything from you, if they're not selling you something, trying to get you in bed, hoping for a raise, or asking you for a loan, why would they be buttering you up? Just as a manipulator's agenda can be kept hidden, so can their flattery. There are methods of flattery that are very subtle or craftily disguised. One of the most subtle forms of flattery is being asked for your advice. It conveys the idea that the manipulator respects and admires your opinions, knowledge, or skill. Another way to disguise flattery is to preface it with a disclaimer such as, "I don't want to embarrass you, but," or, "I know you won't want me to say this, but." Another method of disguise is for the flatterer to disagree with your point of view at first and then come around to agreeing with you. This technique will make you feel smart, persuasive, and listened to. Complimenting you to people you know when you're not present and expecting they'll pass the compliment on to you is an effective disguise. Using this method, the flatterer avoids looking like an obvious suck-up. When someone compliments a quality you have that is seldom noticed or appreciated by others, it's a powerful maneuver that leads you to believe the manipulator is able to recognize your best points and that they value them. That's just the kind of person we want in our lives. Skilled manipulators excel at reading people and figuring out their emotional needs. They also excel at pretending to fulfill them. 29. Love bombing. Yours is the light by which my spirit's born. You are my sun, my moon, and all my stars. E. E. Cummings. Love bombing is a special form of flattery that deserves its own category. Manipulators employ love bombing to ensnare a target. It is a veritable campaign of flattery that bombs the target with non-stop positive reinforcement that includes compliments, praise, and appreciation, declarations of once-in-a-lifetime love, spending as much time as possible with them, frequent calls, texts, and emails, gift-giving, fantastic lovemaking, and engaging in many fun and romantic activities. It can and does happen strictly online as well. What greater flattery could there possibly be than having someone who believes you're the most wonderful person they've ever known, someone who truly appreciates you and believes you are worthy of their time, attention, energy, and heart? The victim is swept off their feet, straight into a relationship that will turn into the worst experience of their life. A clue that you're being manipulated with love bombing is the rapid pace set up by the manipulator. It leaves you without time to come up for air and think clearly and carefully about who this person really is and what their motivations are. When someone declares undying love for you before they really know you, chances are good that their feelings are superficial and that they'll fall out of love with you just as quickly. That doesn't mean they'll move on, though. It means they'll stick around long enough to devalue you slowly and methodically, for many months or even years, and cause you to devalue yourself in the process. Your best defense is to slow the pace of any relationship that begins with such idealization and intensity. Easier said than done when you believe you've met your soulmate. Keep it in mind anyway. Remember, it takes time to get to know someone's true character. Some people are very different than who they first appear to be. We all believe we're good judges of character, but in truth we're not. There's no shortcut. It takes time and observation. Take plenty of time, at least a year, preferably more, to observe a potential partner in a variety of situations. Judge them by their actions, never by their words. Maintain your goals, boundaries, activities, interests, and relationships. If the person really loves you, they won't go anywhere. Many spiritual traditions recognize that when the Dark One appears, he is most beautiful, most wonderful, and most engaging. The truth only comes out later. Unknown. 30. Trance and hypnosis. Skilled manipulators can harness the power of trance and hypnosis to gain power and control. Hypnosis is simply a controlled trance. A trance is an altered mental state we enter as a common and normal occurrence, which is what makes it so easy for a skilled manipulator to induce. When in a trance state, you are extremely relaxed, and your attention is hyper-focused on a person or activity. If you've ever been so thoroughly absorbed in something that you are oblivious to distractions and to the passage of time, which is known as a flow state, you've been in a trance. You can slip into a trance from anything with a repetitive element of movement, vision, sound, thoughts, or touch. Flickering candlelight, dance, sex, massage, video games, long drives, meditation, music, and the sound of someone's voice are all capable of inducing trance. A trance is highly pleasing to both the conscious and subconscious mind. We can also go into a trance when our attention becomes narrowly focused on another person, whose attention is focused narrowly on us. Psychopaths naturally focus intensely on their targets, just as a predator focuses intensely on its prey. They are very present when they're interested in someone, and that intense presence communicated through unwavering eye contact and focused heightened attention, can induce a similar reaction in the person who is the object of their focus. This is not done purposely. It's simply an effect of their natural way of being. Many people say the psychopathic stare causes chills and a feeling of aversion. If a stranger looks at you that way in the grocery store, that may be true. But if someone you're interested in or attracted to does it, then it will come across as flattering interest and attention. You will likely feel captivated. A psychopath or other skilled manipulator may also induce trance or hypnosis purposefully in order to take advantage of a victim. They may create a trancifying atmosphere with music and candlelight, speak in a slow, soothing tone of voice, or engage the victim in an activity known to induce a trance state. Why would a manipulator do this? Trance and hypnosis lower our psychological defenses and leave us vulnerable to suggestion. Hypnotizing someone without their consent is considered unethical for this reason. Increased suggestiveness makes it more likely that a victim will believe statements a manipulator makes during a trance state, and that the beliefs will persist afterward. They will also have a stronger desire to repeat activities they participated in because of the heightened sense of pleasure experienced during trance. A person or activity enjoyed during trance acts as an especially persistent and powerful draw to return to the person and repeat the activity.
And that was the end of Chapter 3 of 30 Covert Emotional Manipulation Tactics, How Manipulators Take Control in Personal Relationships by Adelyn-Birch. Back in a minute.
Come with me, and you'll be in a world of pure imagination. Take a look, and you'll see into your imagination. We'll begin with a spin, traveling in a world of my creation. What we'll see will defy explanation. Anything you There is no life I know to compare with pure imagination. Living there, you'll be free if you truly wish to be. Living there, you'll be free if you truly wish to be.
This is Ron, your host, the only true conservative in the United States today, bidding adios to all the butchers, bakers, and candlestick makers out there. So I'm reminding you that the left has no authority, no power, and they can't win.